Welcome to the Liberation Lab podcast, insights and interviews for the disruptive educator. I'm honored to have my two guests. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So, whoever wants to go first, why don't you tell the people who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
Kelsie, ladies first.
Hey.
Thank you. Yes. Hi, my name is Kelsie Reed. I am a school psychologist working in Prince George's County Public Schools in Maryland. So school psychologist, yes. So why I do what I do, I think for me, my background, my racial background, I'm biracial. I know that I am, I come off as white presenting. So I think I'm in a space where I'm really trying to use my privilege to advocate for what I know is right, using my voice in a way to elevate, lift up the voices of others who aren't as, don't get the same kind of opportunities as I do. So I work in a predominantly Black district, same district that Byron was born and raised in. I'll let him give his intro, but it's a cool little connection that we have that was kind of unintended. But yeah, that's why I'm super passionate about why I'm passionate about what I am. And I'm rambling, sorry. But yes, that's me.
Yeah, and I'm Byron McClure, currently the director of innovation for a company called Seven Mindsets, was the founder of my own SEL company called Lessons For SEL, psychologist, author. More importantly, I'm a father, husband, brother, man of the people. Um, Yeah, man, I've been blessed and fortunate to do a lot. And I grew up in PG County, which is where Kelsie is currently working. And for the listeners who might not be aware of PG County, it's a predominantly African American county. Yeah, PG County got history, man. We got some of the best basketball players coming out of PG County. Shout out KD. Had some of the greats coming out of PG County, and that's home for me. And growing up in PG County, got deep roots there, and I saw Black excellence all around me. And we're gonna talk about strength based, the book that we have, and all of that. But I had a different perception of what it meant to be Black, and my father always made sure, my father and my mom made sure to show my brothers and I the Black excellence around us. And so I talk about being strength based a lot because I saw Black lawyers, Black doctors, just Black magic, like from early on up until leaving, and then went to Hampton, the real HU, where I saw even more Black excellence. And so one of the values that my parents instilled in me is that recognize your excellence, and that you cannot be great unless you bring your people with you. And so that's been something that I have always strived to do. And so my mission is simple. It's to improve outcomes for youth who look like me, and now shifting from what's wrong to what's strong. Because I recognize the Black excellence and grew up in it, thrived in it. So that's what I'm here for.
What's wrong to what's strong? I've heard you say that before, but it hit different just now. So I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So the work that y'all do, both of you, is so vital, particularly where we are positioned. We're talking, I don't know how many academic years have been affected by the pandemic. We're talking about interpersonal relationships being forever changed. When we're talking about our babies in schools, the adults in schools having, to navigate a world where, is it okay to give you a handshake, a hug? Do I not do that? Are we wearing masks? What does that look like? Like just the whole nine. Um, and I see it. I see there's so much that needs to happen for just the overall health and well-being of our school. So I want to first say, like, thank y'all for the work y'all do. Because I'm sure that there's plenty of times where it feels like thankless work. And you're serving and helping, and people kind of just expect it. or it's overlooked. And so I just want to say thank you right off the rip. But, you know, Byron, you talked about it. You said, I was raised to kind of see Black excellence. This is kind of how I was formed. And so this is how I arrived to the work. My question for both of you is, so people see the letters after your name, or if you put doctor on it, because both of y'all, put some respect on their names, folks. Both of them have to have the doctorates. They're serving in these capacities. And people will often get confused and say that the letters after your name mean that it was always this way for you. That this is where you've always been, you've always functioned and vibrated at this frequency, so on and so forth. But take me back to Lil Kelsie. Take me back to Lil Byron. And just like, highlight reel, if you will. When you see in like the movie and the music is playing and they show you the person kind of gradually grow up and they show you key moments in their lives. Talk to me about what that was like for you and how that's kind of shaped the work that you do. And I want to start with you, Kels.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah. As you were asking that question, I was like, wow, like this is big I feel like I'm still on my journey also. So I kind of just came into the field. So, I feel like what I say now, there's going to be even more like 5 years from now. But going way back, I was born and raised in a predominantly white town. And I'm mentioning this because my racial identity development has been really huge for me. It's been like a prevalent theme throughout my whole life. And so I view kind of like my growth in stages based on that. But predominantly white town. And I'll also mention that my family, or all of my immediate family, extended family, is Black. So I don't have any connection to the white side of my family. So growing up in a predominantly white town, being one of the only Black families in that town, and me presenting the way I did just was a lot of challenges for me. And I think this kind of ties into why I'm passionate about what I'm passionate about in terms of schooling as well. Because my experience in our predominantly white schools was very different than my siblings' experiences. And it was just such a stark, like, slap you in the face, you can't even hide behind it type of experience. So I think that kind of pushed me. I went to undergrad, once again, PWI, predominantly white university. So I'm still kind of in this trying to figure out who I am, what it means to be me, and what do I want to do. Went into psychology. That was and I also double majored psychology and sociology. And that was the first time I took a course that was designated to studying race. I think it was like the history of race in the US or something like that. I don't know. I was like, wow, this is putting into words so many things that I've like been feeling and trying to understand. And so that really kind of pushed me forward into wanting to do something in the schools. I knew I wanted to work with kids, fell into school psychology. No one knows what school psychologists are. So just kind of fell into it. And have always just been passionate about the research and specifically the school to prison pipeline, school discipline. I mentioned my siblings. It was something that we saw, disparities in how they were treated, behaviors that were deemed more disruptive than the white kid down the hall doing the same thing. So I think that really just pushed me, and my identity development, just like I'm still working on being comfortable in who I am and how I present, being in spaces that are Black, being in spaces that are white, kind of trying to be me, not try to put on a show, be who I am, but still just kind of staying true to myself, this advocacy work, using the research to inform practice. I'm big on that. I think what's the point of research if it's not actually helping us, do things differently, do things better. So, yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. I kind of skipped over a lot of phases. I was in Chicago for a bit. That's where I went to grad school, moved out here. That was another big shift for me because PG is predominantly Black. So different phases were based on the context that I was in as well, and kind of how I felt about who I was and all that, but leaning into it. And, yeah, excited to kind of be still on that journey.
I think before I kick it to you, Dr. B, I think that, so I just had this conversation with a guest Sunday. We were talking about, and the title was, and it's coming out if it hasn't already, because I don't know the order yet for y'all who are listening. The title was Black Enough. And we were talking about mixed identity. Biracial black is how she, identifies.
Yeah.
And she talked about how for her, her name's Amanda. Amanda talked about how for her there was this space in which she needs to acknowledge the privileges that she, is afforded for her proximity to whiteness, yet how, in her formation, in her growth, in her development, like she just culturally and all, like I'm gonna say this is me, I'm not gonna take her words, but like she's black, like that's her identity, that is who she is. And yet we live in a world, because of white supremacy and all the things that the offshoots and off-brand things, and colorism has done a number. So where somebody will look at you, Dr. Kelsie, and say, she doesn't really have the black experience,
Mm-hmm.
just off of looking at you, right? And I told Amanda, and I'm saying this to you, like my wife, she is black and Puerto Rican. You look at her, she is, lighter skin, the whole nine. And people will say to her some of those similar things. She's been harmed and hurt by those things. When you look at our formation, I was raised by a Panamanian family. When I say Panamanian, I mean they look like me, but they speak Spanish. It's a very eclectic, beautiful culture. And so I grew up with a lot of this infusion of Caribbean and Spanish culture. That was the main stuff that we ate. I had rice with like every meal. That's what we did. My bride, though, she grew up on collard greens and all the things that are traditional, coming from the South, that whole feel of what black culture has, that she grew up on that. Her family, like she every black film, like that's her experience. Where me, I had to arrive at some of those things later in life, but people will look at me and be like, oh, you're black, definitely. But her, they'll just deny her whole experience. So she never felt like she fit in. I say all of that to say, I'm imagining that in your practice, the work that you do and your connections with others is creating that space for them to fit in, because you know what it's like not to experience that. Am I misreading that? Talk to me.
Nope, you're spot on, and I love that so much. I think I'm constantly searching for, those kids that, look like they need a little bit more, kind of, because I struggled, and I know when you're younger, the only thing you want to do is fit in, right? And so yeah, thank you. You hit the nail on the head. I like that a lot. Yeah.
Not only is it needed, but having navigated what you've had to navigate and having to be able to lean into, and still, I'm sure in your profession with the work that these things have done, have to have blackness on trial, if you will.
Always,
Uh,
every day.
yeah,
And a lot of it is my own, putting it on myself, making assumptions about what others are thinking about me. And that's the biggest piece I'm working on, is letting my own self speak for who I am rather than trying to prove who I am. It's a work in progress, though. It takes a lot. And we know this, to unlearn things that you've experienced, right?
that part right there.
Yep.
Absolutely. Dr. B, talk to us. Talk to us about Lil Byron. Talk to us about your formation.
So little Byron was mischievous, outspoken, inquisitive, man, a little bit of everything. So I was the youngest. I had three older brothers, all boys. My mom had two boys. She wanted a girl, and she messed around and had identical twins. It went from
Oh,
two to four, just like that. And I was the youngest. And man, so you talk about Amanda growing up in the South. My parents, deep South, Memphis, West Memphis, Arkansas area. So deep roots, deep history. Every summer, I'm talking riding down dirt roads, like in it for real. And when I was like 2.5, 2 years old, my dad moved us up just because some of the things, on the family side that he saw in Arcus, Memphis, he wanted to move us up to, where there's perceived opportunity. And so my father's a minister, which explains a lot of things, and moved us up to the DMV and moved us to Southeast. And he took this job at Southeast Church of Christ. And which is so ironic because in my later years, that's where I went back to serve. But I'll get back to that. And so we move up there, working in Southeast DC. You got to keep in mind, this was the late 80s, early 90s. And I'm sure most of your listeners know, for those who don't know, the 80s in DC was real. Like it was, we talking crack epidemic, like it was real. And I remember like one Wednesday night, we were headed to Bible study. And like, man, this car came speeding by us, like knocked us out of the lane and like crashed. And then like we saw it on the news. Like dude was in like, it was a high speed chase. He was running from the law, a drug deal going bad. It was wild. Like all these stories. But in the midst of all of that, my dad, my mom was stressing the importance of service, serving your community. Don't run away from it. You're not better than, like you must be of service to people. So we were in the heart of it, like for real. And I have a 10-year-old son. So I have 3 kids, 10-year-old, 7-year-old daughter, and a 1-year-old son. And my 10-year-old is causing me in this moment to be reflective. And when I was 10, it was 1996. And, 95, 96, around that time. And it was the Million Man March in DC, the first one, the original one. And like I remember my dad took me, my brothers, like, yo, that was a major moment in history. I remember my dad like just talking to all these black men and having conversations and learning our history and being of service. Like he brought all these water bottles. I didn't. My dad is dramatic, just like me now. I get it. I was like, dude, why are you bringing all these water bottles? We on the metro, like carrying it, and he's passing them out. But he had the foresight to understand, like, I need to make sure that people are taken care of out here. And then I remember, like, we're out in DC and we're listening to Minister Farrakhan speak, and he's talking about service, and like that, man, that theme has just been pervasive throughout my entire life, serving my community. And so go through PG County, go to Hampton University, go to grad school, and then I come back to my community. I work in the Southern Maryland side, and then I end up getting the opportunity to work, guess where, in Southeast DC. Like, man, that work was so meaningful and impactful. And a lot of times when I'm doing speaking engagements and talking, like, I get hype, I get passionate because, like, yo, like, I've seen this work. And, I know that we could be so much further ahead than where we are. But at the core of that has always been this mission to serve people and to bring community along so that we can advance. And so, man, I'm excited to be having this conversation about liberation because, like, yo, like, that's what I've seen my people fight for. Like, that's what I've seen when I was 10 years old. Like, 1 million men fighting for liberation? Like, come on now. So those things are core to who I am and how I approach this work.
And let the church say amen. You mentioned liberation, and you only got to say it about once to get me going. So, every time that I have the opportunity to talk about and connect with others about the idea and the reality, right, the coming reality, because we have to believe that, of liberation, I always frame it within a question. And my question is, who would you be if it weren't for trauma and oppression? How would you think if it weren't for trauma and oppression? And for me, it frames the kind of environment that I want to construct within schools, in my home, and in my community. Because I think often we create, I'm going to use purposefully the word deficit models of schooling, and the like, because we've been framed to, or we've been socialized to believe that this must be our, we have nothing else. So we just frame structures in what we have and repeat the harm over and over and over, like this broken record. And so I want to I say that to go back to the stories and thank you for sharing your stories here, by the way, to the stories that you just told me. And I want to ask you, if you were speaking to little Byron, if you were speaking to little Kelsie, and you were to ask that question, who would they be with, outside of oppression and trauma? And that being part of your stories. I'm not asking you to rehash the hard parts of your lives, because I know that can be a lot. But thinking through those types of things, what do you think they would say? Like, what do you think are some of the things that come up for you as you navigate that question?
So I want to make sure I answer it correctly. Can you frame
Yeah,
it for me one more time?
absolutely. So I think in pictures, right? So I think about watching Black Panther, the first one, and I think about watching Killmonger, and Michael B has just ascended to the throne. He takes the heart-shaped herb, and he is transported back to his dad's apartment in what I believe was South Central, I believe. And so he's sitting there, or Compton, it was Compton. So he's sitting there, and you see him relive the trauma of his past, holding his father, rocking, crying, all these different things. And it clicks. Like, if you didn't know before, you're like, that's why you're the way you are. That's why you believe the things you believe. And then I think, well, who would he be if it weren't for those moments? Like, if there was some healing and hope in those things, who would he be? Right? And so now I'm imagining, now you are sitting on the couch across from younger self, and you know all you know about how you've grown, developed, and had to navigate the things you've had to navigate. If you were thinking through life and you were asking your younger self that question, knowing what you know now, what do you think you would say? Like, this is who I would be if it weren't for oppression, racism, and all the isms that we deal with. This is how my life would have been different. However, I think it's a broad question on purpose to give you space to be able to answer how you feel.
Yeah, I love that framing, man. And, some people might not side with Killmonger. I think all sides were necessary if we're going to talk about it. For me, what I will say is this. I perceive that I am standing on the shoulders of those who have come before me. And I know that they have not been in a space to say, if we didn't have to go through this, our life would be. And so I see it as a way of saying that because you went through that, I'm going to take every moment that I've had, good, bad, traumatic, learning experiences, and continue doing the work. Because liberation, I don't think, is an end goal. I think that it is a process that we must be striving towards every single thing that we do.
Good.
And so as I'm speaking to my younger self and all the things that he will experience, I will encourage him to, just go harder, because your people got your back. Like, you're not by yourself in it. Like, man, your people will be proud of you. Like, your ancestors will be proud of you. And hold your head high. Don't cower, from it. And even when you're standing alone, keep standing and keep going and keep going hard, and don't be afraid of it. There's this powerful quote. I forget who says it. I'm sure you might know it, but it says, I was afraid to speak, but even, when I was afraid, I still did it, even when my voice trembles. And it's like, despite all of those things, keep doing it. And so I'm standing firmly on, the work of my ancestors and keeping that work going, because those moments are pivotal to who I am. And I honestly wouldn't want those moments to go away. Killmonger had those scars, man. Like, he had all those scars from battle.
Yeah.
And I get the question, but if he didn't have those scars, he would not have been able to ascend the throne to where he could go
Yeah.
back and be reflective on it.
Yeah.
So I would argue, man, he needed those. And
Mm-hmm.
as I'm telling my younger self, yo, you need what you're going to go through because you're going to be battle ready. And so when these moments come up, like, man, you're not going to be afraid of nothing. So keep going and be a little soldier, man. Listen,
Wow.
you take me back, man, to this liberation. Man, if we going to talk about liberation, we got to talk about real liberation. So.
Oh no, 100%. 100%. I always struggle when people talk about liberation in a vacuum. Like real lives aren't affected. Like there aren't real consequences to, and or when we talk about liberation and we're just looking at numbers on the page and forgetting that those numbers symbolize lives.
Real lives.
Yeah.
And doing it from a place of comfort.
Yeah.
And like I think like this is really fresh. And I know I might be jumping ahead, but Black psychologists, we were recently out in Denver and we experienced this act of racism. Our president, who is only the second Black president of the association, out in Denver, and there's been other incidents out in Denver, and it's really been revealing that people can talk about DEI and all of these things, and it sounds good on paper, but when you're confronted with what are you gonna do,
Yeah.
man, them true colors shine bright in 4K, just like your camera quality is crystal clear, and they can't hide from it, and we can see every blemish. And
Yeah.
so in these conversations, man, you either with it or you not. And because of those things that I've been through, what I've seen my parents grow through their stories, my ancestors, and man, we don't have time to be lukewarm. Either you're in it or you're not. For my younger self, like, man, I deserve to be all the way in, 100%, 10 toes down.
Yeah. I'll say this and I'm gonna kick it to you, Dr. Kelsie. I think that being able to navigate the space between those wounds becoming scars is the hard part for folks, because as it's healing, right, to use that analogy, and it scabs up, well, you got, my grandma used to say, you got to let the air hit it, you know you got to let that thing scab up, and don't mess with it, because the scab is part of the process of healing. And you'll know that the scab needs to be removed when it starts itching and becoming uncomfortable. You know that there's healing underneath, so you can then move things out the way. And I say all that to say, for folks who are navigating spaces where it just seems like there is thing after thing, whether it be financial or otherwise, whether it be racism and colorism and all the isms of our world, it can be easy to quit when the wound hasn't healed yet. But if you allow it to heal and you get to the other side, those scars become a symbol of the fact that you made it through, and a sign to others around you to be able to navigate those same things. And that's what I'm hearing from both of your stories, right? You didn't go through anything you went through, Dr. B, to just not impact others. It serves as a testimony for everybody else. Dr. Kelsie, you get to navigate and create space for people who feel like they're not Black or brown enough, because you've had to heal and move forward and create space for others, and be able to champion the cause for people who may have those views, to be able to come to the other side of things and realize, oh, liberation looks like broadening what I think my definition of Black is, what I think my definition of brown is. And so uh, I just want to thank y'all for sharing that. And I want to kick it to you, Dr. Kelsie. And I know Dr. B said a lot, but if you were to navigate that question, what was coming up for you as you thought about it?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I Byron and I have been on the same wavelength a lot lately. I know we've been doing a lot of projects together, but I was kind of trying to grapple. I was coming to a similar type of answer. But what I really thought about when you were talking about that whole, no oppression, no racism, all of those things, if I were to imagine like the flip side of my life, like imagine that I grew up with all of my white family members and I didn't have any contact with my Black family, right? Like my exact situation, but flipped. First of all, thinking about that, I don't think I would want that, right? Like it sounds, like, oh, you wouldn't have to deal with the generational trauma passed down through all of your ancestors, navigating your racial identity, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know who I would be without all of those experiences, right? Like, I truly, I can't imagine, but I just wanted to share that was the first thing that came to mind to me. Like I know obviously I operate in a lot of spaces with this white privilege. But what would it have been like if I didn't grow up in a family that was actively talking about race, talking about these concepts, teaching me the importance of social justice? That was a huge part of my upbringing. And I think if, in some other alternate universe, baby Kelsie was plopped into that white family, like not to make assumptions. I think that was all of those experiences did bring me to where I am today. And I needed to have those. I need to be in this space right now, doing what you said, cultivating that space for multiracial, biracial, mixed race people, to feel welcome, to feel that they have a voice, they play a part in this work. And
I affirm that. I do not like the number that colorism has done to us. It bothers me to my core. And part of it is because I know how strong and formidable we are when we're united. And when we, I say this all the time, that there is a system is working when the oppressor doesn't need to be there for it to continue to work. And so when we talk about the ways in which, these things perpetuate, and it doesn't need the oppressor, we do it sometimes to ourselves because we haven't healed, right? And I want to be very careful when I say this, because someone could hear this and say, there you go, somebody criticizing us again. No, the one person who I know loves me on this side of heaven is my wife. The reason I know she loves me is she don't put up with my junk. She gonna tell me the truth. And she's gonna be critical when I'm messing up. That doesn't mean she loves me less. Matter of fact, I would say it's a sign that she loves me more. When people are willing to let you walk around with something stuck in your teeth all day and they don't tell you nothing, you don't really care about me. You know what I'm saying? Don't let me walk around looking trifling. Like, say something. And so I appreciate and vibe with folks who are willing to, from a place of love, authenticity, and collective like uplift. When we really truly value the community, and I say community is when I make your problem my problem, right? Like that type of community. When we're willing to do that, man, we're formidable. The stuff that we can do. And so I so vibe with what you all are saying. And then we could literally spend the rest of this podcast talking about that point. But I want to move us because you all, both of you, and one day maybe I will, but y'all have written, this book right here. And I want to talk to you about your book, Hacking Deficit Thinking. Before we dive into like key points and concepts, before it was a book, it was an idea, right? So talk to us about, like, give us a backstage pass to the book. How did it get here? How do I have a copy in my hands? Tell that story a little bit for us.
Basically, I'll start from the technical side. A publisher approached me with an idea to write a book. It was like, we have the series, could really be on anything that you want it to be on. I said no. I don't like, and this is what you just heard is me trying to practice the concepts of the book and not being deficit thinking. So I have to work hard to write well. That's a struggle for me. And so I didn't want to do a book. And I went back to the publisher and I said, the only way that I would do this is if I'm able to have somebody help me. And the only person I could think of was Kelsie, just because of the work that she had done, just around similar issues, disproportionality. Her work is dope. But that's that piece. On a practical level, like, man, it's just the way how I approach it. Like I talked about in my formative years, like I saw Black excellence around us. I had people who poured into me. I had people who saw the potential in me. I saw people who saw me as more than just my worst moments in life. And that's how I approach my work as a practitioner, as a psychologist, as a father, just as a human being in everything that I do, is seeing the potential in people and moving people from where they are towards where they can be.
Yeah.
And we took those ideas, and we put those thoughts and ideas into a book. And now we have Hacking Deficit Thinking. Kelsie?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can just kind of add, I guess. So, I yeah, I mean Byron, I remember when he called me, and he was like, or I think he texted me and was like, "Hey, like, can I call you? Like, I got something really big we got to talk about." I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "Hey, like, do you want to write a book?" And he said it just like that, like, "Hey, you want to write a book with me?" And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "No, for real. Like, do you want to write a book?" And he's like, "It can be on whatever. It can be on deficit thinking, kind of." And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And it was that like quick of a moment for such a big thing. I mean, just that the initial conversation, right? Then there were a lot of follow-up conversations. But I just remember that, like, okay, we're writing a book. I was like, I don't know what this entails. I've never written a book before, but we're gonna do this. Like, I got the best person by my side. Like, we're gonna get this done. And yeah, I think so. For me, I am just so grateful because a lot of this really does stem from my dissertation. So my dissertation was on deficit thinking. It was on racial disproportionality in school discipline. So like having an opportunity to like work off of that and build something practical, like who gets to do that? Like straight out of grad school. So I'm just super grateful to have this masterpiece. I'm gonna call it a masterpiece. Yeah.
So first, let me affirm that I believe, what you talk about, and listen, I've started, I haven't finished, so I'm gonna put that out there. But from what I've read and what I know about both of you, I can wholeheartedly say that this needs to be in the hands of every educator, every person who has the opportunity to be able to shape the life of a young person needs to read this.
Thank you.
And I
Thank
say
you.
that 100%. And I say that because what you talk about in this book, for me, it it's like the timing in which I picked it up and what I was thinking and experiencing as a school leader, um, it almost just goes hand in hand. It's like we were on the same frequency. I picked up the book. I was reading what I was thinking on the page. It was just great. Like when you go to the average school in America, let's just say, you know, whatever school you want to name, insert your name here. There there is a sense in which I see it with my own kids. Let me do it this way. My son and my daughter went to school with what I call the bounce. They would just bounce their way to school. They were happy. It was great. They wanted to learn. And they get to about grade 3, grade 4, particularly grade 4. And why grade 4? Because learning for joy turns to learning for a test. And that test and those pacing guides and the structures of schooling take the joy out of it to the point where I have to give my son sometimes, not all the time, because he's pretty, he wants to still go and push through it, but I have to give him a pep talk. I got to talk him into going. On the school leader side, I see the disproportionality. I see who gets sent out of class continuously. I see what the teachers expect when they send that kid to me, because I'm supposed to be judge, jury, and executioner for their pride and their ego, because that kid said something or did something that assaulted their ego. And you better exact my justice. That's what it comes down to. We never say it that way. We say things like disruptive. We say things like this person was disrespectful, defiant.
Yeah.
We use things like that. That's the language, the coded language we use, And so both of you talk in this work about reframing our understanding, reframing kind of like a lens. You say that in the book. And so, again, I think of pictures. So I think about this, and I'm going to cue it back to y'all. Every year, and I hate it, I got to go to the eye doctor every year. And I go to the eye doctor, and I sit in front, and my vision's been pretty much the same for the last, I don't know how long. It's bad, but I'm there. Do you follow me? I wear contacts. It's just what it is. And I sit in front of, the eye doctor puts the lenses in front of me. He says 1 or 2, and he clicks it, and I have to look at it and be like, okay, it's 1, and then 2, or I get to this whole process. And they said, can you read that bottom line for me? And I've done it so much that I know like the first 3 things are EVO. Like I've done it so much. You follow me? And I bring all that up to say that when I'm looking in the frames that they've given me, the picture of what's in front of me changes as they change the lens. It gets clearer as they get closer to what my needs are and how I need to be seeing the picture. And I think because of teacher preparation programs and the like, we've been handed a deficit lens that we need to unlearn. So here's my setup. I'm lobbing it up for you. You go ahead and dunk that thing. My question to y'all is, I'm an average teacher in a classroom who hasn't picked up your book yet. And I don't say average to put them down. I'm just saying like everyday teacher. And you are talking about switching my vision. Like you're talking about switching how I see kids. But no, I love kids. I got into education because I really love kids. Talk to me about that teacher and why they need to have a reframe.
And so the cool part about it, that was a perfect live. Kelsie and I, when we're explaining what deficit thinking is, we talk about faulty lens, distorted lens, but we use this example of shades, and I talk about my kids touching it and it gets all grungy and things. But I like that, man. I'll give you credit. We might have to start using that one, but
we'll cite you. We'll coach you.
Well, yes, we'll coach you for sure. But I like that. And one thing that's important to answer your question, and what I'm thinking is, it's not the fault of the person for their vision of what they're seeing. The ophthalmologist in the scenario that you gave, they're doing that to test and see where you are. They're giving you they're putting, and I'm not an ophthalmologist, I'm a psychologist, but I imagine they're putting different types of lenses in front of you so you could see, okay, you should be able to see at this point, you should be able to see at this point. It's not EVO, you got that, but you failed all of these miserably. It's the ophthalmologist that's controlling that. And what Kelsie, now what we argue is that graduate prep programs, our training, in some instances, our experiences are the reasons why we are viewing the world around us the way how we are. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if we stay and let's niche down, our graduate prep training programs, they are controlling the lens with how we view young people. Mm-hmm. If we want to take that a step further, they are shaping the way in which how we practice as practitioners. To make it more specific, I'm a psychologist. I identify as a Black male. Going through my graduate prep programs at the master's level, at the doc level, I was trained in a very specific way to use tools in a very specific way without being reflective of the lens that was before me. And what happened, I went into the field, which is the school system, and working with young people through a lens that was given to me. And that lens through which I operated was a way to see the absolute worst in people and to name what people can't do and to go in and cause ridiculous amounts of harm. And so you mentioned earlier that systems can perpetuate harm when they're strong systems without the oppressor even being there.
Indeed.
And as a Black man, I then became part of that same system, man. And this is a very real thing, which is why it's so important to understand that deficit thinking is operating as this distorted, faulty lens. And it's imperative that we get to the ophthalmologist and be like, yo, stop playing with people. This is the right lens. These are the right tools that we need to give to people. And this is how people need to see the world, so that they can go in with the lens of, yo, this is what's right. This is what's working. And this is a holistic approach, because there are very real things that we got to address as well. Absolutely. There are very real challenges that our young people have before them. We have to go in with a very well-balanced approach to the work. And so that's at the core of what we're trying to convey in this book. Kelsie, you want to add anything to that?
Let me say one thing before you go in. One quick thing. To your point, and this is a lot for you, Kelsie, is when you go to I'm going to say eye doctor. When you go to the eye doctor, they give you the lens that they believe you had first. That's the primary lens. And then they switch you one above and one below to navigate. Will you see better if I change you one more higher or one more lower? Do you follow me? And that's how they navigate it. So when you say, okay, wait a minute, you're trending this direction. And then they say, okay, let's fine tune it. And then they switch it. And the next one you'll notice goes left and right. It doesn't go up and down. Up and down is like the primary lens. Right and left is like, okay, let's tweak it a little bit. You follow me? And so to your point, teacher prep programs have given us a lens, and the process of reframing that you talk about in your book is that the piece that says, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know my vision could get clearer than what I have right now. I didn't know that I could read better and see better just by changing how I see these things. I'm a better practitioner now, right? And so I'm gonna kick that right to you. I want you to go with it, Kelsie, but
and it actually kind of leads into what I was going to say, is that lens that we're currently operating from is not all of the disparities, all of the things that we're seeing right now, all of the outcomes in education are because of that lens, because we haven't gone up to that clearer lens yet. If we go up to that lens, we're going to feel better about what we do. I mean, we're going to see better, obviously, but we're also going to see the full picture, because this hyper focus, the current lens, has us only seeing weaknesses in kids. It has us blaming kids for things that are more systemic in nature, have nothing to do with the individual child, and we're only identifying weaknesses in general. So once we jump up to that clearer lens, we realize that kids are more than just those weaknesses. They're a whole individual, there's strengths, there are ways to operate to have better outcomes because we can see the full picture. So I love that analogy, and I go to eye doctor every year. Obviously, my lens, my eyes are terrible, so that's really helping me. I'm a visual person too, so I like that a lot. Yeah.
So sorry, my daughter snuck in and scared the living daylights out of me.
That is little Byron, I swear.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So sorry.
We didn't even hear her.
I didn't see her. No. She grabbed my foot and I was like, what in the world? Is she supposed
to be in bed? I thought they would.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And I spit my water out and everything. She scared the living daylights out of me.
You know what's so crazy about that is to even think about just that instance, right? You could look at your daughter and say, she is being disobedient. She's being defiant to the rules that I have laid down. She knows she's supposed to stay in bed. Or you could reframe that and say,
Yep.
no, she was determined to see her father before
Yep.
she went to sleep. She knew
Yeah,
her daddy was working. Go ahead.
I love that reframe. And that's actually one of the things we've been working on is staying in bed. And so we're trying to do reinforcements and
Yeah.
all of these different things. And one thing that's important is being strength based is a process.
Yes,
It's a
sir.
process. We might not have it today. We might not have it a month from now, but we are striving towards doing that. And kids will help you along that journey for sure.
You talk a lot about the the stories we tell ourselves, right? The the reinforced narratives that we believe about kids. You talking here about building our cultural competency, right? Um, I want to go there for a second. I talk a lot about, moving from like I get what you mean. This is not a shot at you, but follow me, and I think you're going to agree with what I'm about to say. I think that sometimes when we have these conversations, it's easy for people to, when something is said repeatedly, to kind of make their own definition come alive, right? Because it becomes like this buzzword, if you will. So what I mean is, when we think of the word competence and we say cultural competence, I've seen, and this is no fault of your own, and I agree with your definition as you describe it in the book. So I want to make that very clear. But I think that people can have the wrong lens, borrowing from the book again, uh, of how they arrive to their understanding of cultural competence, and and I want people to move from their understanding of just like cultural competence to like cultural proficiency. You follow me? Like I want them to come in, and it is, you're not just tolerating the kid that's in front of you. You realize that the ways that their ways of knowing, their understandings that they bring, the differences, you talk about this too, the differences as strength. Um, these things happen and they make our classrooms come alive if we're willing to access them, right? It is this available plug, outlet, if you will. And if we would just plug in, it would change how we do this thing called schooling, how we do this thing called education. But let's say I'm an educator, right? And I'm like, okay, listen, I hear you. I work in a predominantly, black or brown, context. And so when I'm looking, and I'm pushing it to be like, like we said, if we're going to talk about liberation, let's be real. I work in that district and most of the kids are black. So I can't help but think of a black kid when I think about somebody who's misbehaving because that's all the kids I teach. One. Or two, when you talk about, and this, I'm using this broadly so y'all could just chime in. But, or secondly, you talk about cultural competency and all those things, but I'm looking at these kids and I'm coming in trying to help them. Oh, they're interrupting my lesson. They don't want to do no work. There's an apathy about them. They. And these are the things that I think about, and I'm trying to do right because I love kids, but you don't know what I'm experiencing right now. What do you say to those educators who may be hearing this and might have some pushback for this whole idea of cultural competency and reframing?
Yeah, and in the book, that's one of the cool things about it. We have a pretty neat outline. We give a reframe. We also provide strategies to help people of what they can do tomorrow. But um, we know that there's going to be pushback, and we want to equip people to be ready when that pushback comes. And there it is. There it is. Yes, yes, yes. And that page that you just showed is reframing adjectives. And so one of the things I love about that part is we are giving people the language that they need. Um, oftentimes, again, going back to how we were trained, our worldviews, our experiences, like the language that we have is what we've acquired just from our experiences. And so people need help. People need to know, okay, this kid might not be disrespectful. Maybe they are advocating for themselves. So that table gives some amazing reframes for that. But we also give, some common terminology, words that you can use for some of the common pushback. What I wanted to quickly hit on is, man, I think you're absolutely right. And whether it's cultural responsiveness or diversity or equity and all these things that can become buzzwordy, like I like to pull from an actual framework. And we talk about this at some point between page 1 and the end of the book. But we give kudos to Paul Gorski, and for those who aren't familiar with Paul Gorski, he has the equity literacy framework, and basically what the equity literacy framework is a framework that we can understand how to disrupt inequities, and he basically says we have to be a threat to any system of inequity. And like
Yes.
I like that. I like that framework. And one of the things that he talks about are these equity detours. And the equity detours are those things that give the perception that you're doing the real work when you're really not. And
Yeah.
so, what you mentioned, those are things, those might be people, those might be systems that are giving the appearance, but nothing is really changing. And if we
Yeah.
really want to be about it, like we have to be threats to inequity and actually challenge that work. Like we can't pace for privilege. And what that means is going at a
Yeah.
pace that's comfortable for the majority. We
Absolutely.
saw that in real time in Denver. Like people are going at a pace that's comfortable for them. Change
Yeah.
will never come for that. And then quickly, what I wanted to say, because I worked in predominantly like black places, high poverty areas. And again, systems will operate how they're intended to operate, and it doesn't matter who's at the helm. And I saw that. And even if you have predominantly black educators educating predominantly black kids, we can still fall victim of a culture of low expectations. We can
Absolutely.
still fall victim to a culture of those kids are from that neighborhood and this is all
Hmm.
they'll ever be. And I loved how, I think it's Teacher Man, shout out to Teacher Man on IG. I talk a lot about the school to prison pipeline, but he talked about the other, what do you call it? Like the second school to prison something.
Yeah.
But it's this culture of low expectations. So those are all real things, and we're not going to solve the world's problems in this conversation, but it's a good conversation to be having for sure.
Yeah, I'll just kind of briefly add the whole piece about I always admit and acknowledge, I know this is easier said than done. Like, I know that what we're telling you to do goes completely against everything that we've ever done in the field of education.
Yeah.
And I think with that, the way I like to view it, and Byron says this all the time, is we have such a great opportunity right now to do things differently. And I think I'm in a place where I want to lean into that. And I'm encouraging any teacher who's listening right now, all the teachers I work with, to lean into that because what we're doing right now isn't working. And I think that's kind of what I always go back to. Everything's crazy right now. What if we try to do things a little differently? You know? And going back to the reframing your adjectives, one thing that I really like, a phrase that I've been using a lot lately is using your powers or your strengths for good instead of evil. So talking about, when how we can help kids even understand, this is how your behavior is perceived when you do it like this. But let's see how we can use that behavior, that strength of yours in a way that contributes to the classroom, right? Like I know that there's a way that this, your excitedness, your eagerness to learn right now, it's coming off as you're disrupting me. But let's find a way for you to contribute to the classroom, contribute to all of your peers' learning experiences by using that eagerness in a more productive way. So that's a tangible thing I think that can really be powerful if used in the right way.
As you both were talking, and I want to honor your time, so we're going to round out a little bit here. As you both were talking and sharing, I thought about when I first stepped into teaching. I started in Camden, New Jersey, voted the poorest, voted the most dangerous city to live in when I started working there. Um, and I was, a recent graduate, probably 2 years removed from college. Spent some time in a nonprofit, then I stepped into the classroom. Right, and I stepped into the classroom, and I realized, nothing I learned has prepared me for this moment right here. I know math. I could teach middle school math. We got this, cool. But I got to teach it to these kids, and I got to make it come alive, and I am not prepared. Oh, and I got to manage like the systems in this classroom. Like it's got to run. Wait, what? So what they did is they handed me a book, and that book was called Teach Like a Champion. This is my comment. Not the doctors on your screen or on this podcast, if you're listening, are saying this. Burn that book. Toss it out. Don't ever pick it up. I have reframed, using your words, I have reframed that book, Teach Like a White Supremacist. Let me tell you why I say this. One, it gives you methods of control for kids, and it teaches you to literally police their movements as a way to instruct. So they have teaching pedagogy in there, strategies, and they say, be seen looking. In other words, make sure you're straddling, the doorway so you can greet kids coming in, cool, but you want to make sure that they're in their seat within 30 seconds. They have a pencil in their hand and we're getting started because learning, and don't get me wrong, some of those things are good things on the surface, but when you peer deep down, the question is, what do you believe about kids to believe that this is what you have to do in order for them to work, to function, to do the things? And so I want to say that for me, hearing you say this makes me think of that first year teacher who looked like the kids he taught, but enacted so much harm to the point where later on, as they've graduated, they search you, they Google you, they find you, they friend request you because, I'm a millennial, so I'm on Facebook. They find you, and I've had to apologize to every single one of them. I was a trash educator. Like I would seriously do I would put myself on a pip if I went back. And I need you to know, I know I didn't do the best job knowing what I know now. And those kids were so forgiving, so grace-filled, more so than I think, a lot of the adults in our buildings are. I say all that to say I needed your book. And so I know that there's an educator who will listen to this, who will need your book too. And I'm going to put this in the recording just for those who will listen to this. If you are an educator and you're stepping onto the scene and you recognize that this is something that you need, I want you to I don't care if you send me an email, one of them little owls from Harry Potter, you communicate to me and you tell me that you need this book, I will personally buy you this book. That is how much I believe it needs to be in your hands. If you're hearing this, reach out to me. I got you, because I know how much I needed it. So I want to thank y'all for your work. I want to thank you for what you put into this book. And I want to thank you for how education will be changed because of this book. So all of that to ask you this question before and I want you to feel free. I'm going to ask you, again, how people can connect with you and all that later on. But this question I want to ask you. You wrote the book. It's out. It's in people's hands. If you had one goal/wish as a result of this book, what would it be?
I think for me, and this might sound so minor. I don't know, Byron, I'm sure is going to say something real big picture. I'm I'm more of a, I don't know, I'm more of a pessimist, to be honest. For me personally, if we can change the practices of just one person in one school building, like that already means the world. Like we're seeing people who are literally adopting things from this book and changing the way they do things. Like that's all that I really even, that's all I care about right now, is the fact that this book has helped the right person at the right time to do something a little different. You know, that's it for me.
Yeah, man, that story that you shared is deep, man, and you know, like I hope that you're not beating yourself up like the kids who found you on social media. They found you for a reason, and so something you did resonated with them, and they remembered you all those years later. Um, so shout out to the work that you're doing. The fact that you perceive our body of work uh, to be impactful, because I believe if it was trash, you would let us know, and we wouldn't even be on this platform. Oh, I believe it. I believe it. So I certainly appreciate that. That's high praise, man. My hope with writing this book was to show people that there's another way. When
Mm.
I talk about this inside of the book, I share this story often, but I mean, it was real. Like I remember, and this has happened often, but this captures the feeling of being in an IP meeting where hearing what this child can't do, and it's a room full of people. I saw an Instagram post. They said when the OT is there, you know it's going to be a long meeting, but it was one of those meetings where OT, speech, special education, case manager, psychologist, all these people, and then the mom, me, administrator, and the mom is right to my left. Every person going around the room just saying not just deficits or what your weaknesses, but what your child will never be able to do. That is devastating.
Mm.
And as a parent who has hopes and dreams and aspirations for your child, to be confronted from people that you might not even know, people who haven't even made you feel welcome, people who don't even really know your child, to tell
Yeah.
you like what your child isn't going to be able to do. And I can feel that mother's energy just being
Mm.
zapped from the room, being zapped.
Mm.
And like it got to the special education teacher, and like you could see her eyes getting red, tears rolling. And then in every IEP meeting, it gets to the school psychologist, and we have these 30-page reports. And people look to us, okay, so tell us, does this child qualify? And I refused to continue berating this child in front of this mom and being a bearer of what this child will never be able to do. And so I made a commitment that I will always do the best that I can for parents to find hope, to find inspiration,
Mm.
to
Mm.
leave feeling filled with what their child can do. And that has always been important to me. And in this book, my hope is that we are inspiring people, energizing people so that they understand that they can be bearers of hope, that they don't have to identify the worst of people, that for those parents who are going through it, like that isn't the way how we have to practice. Like we don't have to do school that way. So even before we get to the IEP table, like we can be proactive, we can be strength based, we can really implement these practices and bring about meaningful differences. And so that's my hope in this work. And like Kelsie said, we're hearing positive things already, and so we just want to keep inspiring and doing good work.
The goal of, like you said, inspiring and creating, like, so for me, just full disclosure, like I'm using this as training ground for the teachers that I have in my school. Um, I talk about wanting to build, for example, restorative practices with fidelity in my school. And you can't get there if you don't see kids, if you don't value them. You can't get there if your thinking is such that, and this is what teachers do, and this is what I love about your book, and I want to encourage teachers. Teachers tend to think that these approaches, this type of thinking, this approach, like all of these things is like simple math. That is, I take the one child, I do this one thing, and it equals two. And they forget that sometimes trauma, experiences, the fact that you are the seventh or eighth teacher that they've had that year in that subject. And so you represent so much of the trauma and stuff that they've experienced prior to. So they have to really come to you and really, like, they have to build trust and unlearn what they've learned thus far about what teachers do, right? Like, we forget all of that from the vantage point of the teacher and the expectation. I mean, from the vantage point of the student. And the expectation is you must comply or die. And so for me, I'm grateful for having something that I believe can help transform the culture, climate of the place that I work personally. Like, this is hitting home for me, for the kids that I teach that I love, who sometimes tap dance on my last nerve, right? And I have to work to have the strength-based approach to how I see them in that moment, how I show up for, love, and serve who may be ill-deserving in the moment. That's when love is really tested. It's not tested when you have the best behaviors. It's tested when you have the worst behaviors at the worst possible times and your superintendent's about to walk through the door. That's when love is tested, right? And so I appreciate this work. And I appreciate what y'all do. So listen, I want you to tell people, how can they get the book? How can they connect with y'all? Anything you got going on that you want to plug, please let the people know how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah, definitely. Be sure to follow us across social media. Be strength-based. Hacking Deficit Thinking is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Yeah, Kelsie, anything I'm forgetting?
I'll also add, we started the Strength Based Collective. If you go to strengthbasedcollective.com, you can purchase the book there. And we are on a mission to provide strength-based resources for educators, parents, children. So that's kind of our next venture after the book. We're really trying to apply these practices in ways for all of you. So follow us there. And then our personal pages, I'm Dr. Kelsie Reed, Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah, and on Instagram, B McClure 6, the number 6. On Twitter, I am School Psych Life, and I am on TikTok, and I have no clue what I'm doing on there. So let's just stay on Instagram. I tried. I gave it a shot. Yeah, absolutely. But man, thank you for inviting us. Man, I'm a fan. I've been a fan of the work that you're doing, the message that you're getting out there. So thank you for sharing this platform, for that opportunity to have this conversation with you, man. Awesome, man.
Yes, thank you.
Listen, y'all, please grab this book, get it into your hands, buy one from your teacher bestie, form a book club around it. Do what you have to do, man, because our kids deserve this, for real. So thank you, Dr. B. Thank you, Dr. Kelsie, for your time. And I hope that every single person will connect with them, connect with this work, man. And let's bring liberation to every single school that we can, man, because of stuff like this. So thank y'all. All right. Till next time, y'all. Peace.